Hello, everyone. This is the continuation of our discussion for the political and legal factors that impact international trade. So, as you might expect, established democracies, such as those found in the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Japan, and Australia, offer a high level of political stability, while many countries in Asia and Latin America also are functioning democracies. Their stage of development impacts the stability of their economic and trade policy, which can fluctuate with government changes. So, within reason, in democracies, businesses understand that most rules survive changes in government. Any changes are usually a reflection of a changing economic environment, like the world economic crisis of 2008, and not a change in the government players. So, this contrast with more authoritarian governments, where democracy is either not in effect or simply a token of process. China is one of the more visible examples, with each strong government and limited individual rights. However, in the past 2 decades, China has pursued a new balance of how much the state plans and manages the national economy, while the government still remains the dominant force by controlling more than a third of the economy. More private businesses have emerged. China has successfully combined state intervention with private investment to develop a robust, market driven economy, all within a communist form of government. This system is commonly referred to as a socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics. The Chinese are eager to portray their version of combining an authoritarian form of government with a market oriented economy as a better alternative model for fledgling economies, such as those in Africa. This new combination has also posed more questions for businesses that are encountering new issues such as privacy, individual rights, and intellectual rights protections as they try to do business with China, now the second largest economy in the world behind the United States. The Chinese model of an authoritarian government and a market oriented economy has, at times, tilted favor toward companies, usually Chinese, who understand how to navigate the nuances of this new system. Chinese government control on the internet, for example, has helped propel homegrown Baidu, a Chinese search engine, which earns more than 73% of the Chinese search engine revenues. Baidu self censors and, as a result, has seen its revenues soar after Google limited its operations in the country. So it might seem straightforward to assume that businesses prefer to operate only in democratic capitalist countries where there is little or no government involvement or intervention. However, history demonstrates that for some industries, global firms have chosen to do business with countries whose governments control that industry. Businesses in industries such as commodities and oil have found more authoritarian governments to be predictable partners for long term access and investment for those commodities. The complexity of trade in these situations increases as throughout history, governments have come to the aid and protection of their nation's largest business interest in markets around the world. The history of oil industry shows how various governments have, on occasion, protected their national companies' access to oil through political force. In current times, the Chinese government has been using a combination of government loans and investment in Africa to obtain access for Chinese companies to utilize local resources and commodities. Many business analysts mention these issues in discussions of global business ethics and the role of responsibility of companies in different political environments. So, what are the different legal systems? So, let's focus briefly on how the political and economic ideologies that define countries impact their legal systems. In essence, there are three main kinds of legal systems. The first one is common law, second is civil law, and the third one is the religious or theocratic law. Most countries actually have a combination of these systems, creating hybrid legal systems. So what is civil law? Civil law is based on a detailed set of laws that constitute a code and focus on how the law is applied to the facts. It's the most widespread legal system in the world. Now, common law is based on traditions and precedents. In common law systems, judges interpret the law and judicial rulings can set precedent. The last one is religious law. It is also known as theocratic law and is based on religious guidelines. The most commonly known example of religious law is Islamic law, also known as Sharia. Islamic law governs a number of Islamic nations and communities around the world and is most widely accepted religious law system. Two additional religious law systems are the Jewish halacha and the Christian canon system, neither of which is practiced at the national level in the country. The Christian canon system is observed in the Vatican City. Now, the most direct impact on business can be observed in Islamic law, which is a moral rather than a commercial legal system. Sharia has clear guidelines for aspects of life. For example, in Islamic law, business is directly impacted by the concept of interest. According to Islamic law, banks cannot charge or benefit from interest. This provision has generated an entire set of financial products and strategies to stimulate interest or a gain for an Islamic bank while not technically being classified as interest. Some banks will charge a large upfront fee. Many are permitted to engage in sale, buyback, or leaseback of an asset. For example, if a company wants to borrow money from an Islamic bank, it would sell its assets or product to the bank for a fixed price. At the same time, an agreement would be signed for the bank to sell back the assets to the company at a later date and at a higher price. The difference between the sale and buyback price functions as the interest. In the Persian Gulf region, or in the Persian Gulf region alone, there are 22 Sharia compliant Islamic banks, which is 2000, in 2008 had approximately 300 billion US dollar in assets, according to Tala Malik of Gulf Islamic backed assets to hit 300 billion US dollars. So clearly, many global businesses and investment banks are finding creative ways to do business with these Islamic banks so that they can comply with Islamic law while earning a profit. So, government business trade relations. The impact of political and legal factors on international trade. So, how do political and legal realities impact international trade? And what do business need to think about as they develop their global strategy? Governments have long intervened in international trade through a variety of mechanisms. First, let's briefly discuss some of the reasons behind these interventions. So, why do governments intervene in trade? Government intervene in trade for a combination of political, economic, social, and cultural reasons. Politically, a country's government may seek to protect jobs or specific industries. Some industries may be considered essential for national security purposes, such as defense, telecommunications, and infrastructure. For example, a government may be concerned about who owns the ports within its country. National security issues can impact both the import and exports of a country, as some governments may not want advanced technological information to be sold to unfriendly foreign interests. Some governments use trade as a retaliatory measure if another country is politically or economically unfair. On the other hand, governments may influence trade to reward country for political support on global matters. Governments are also motivated by economic factors to intervene in trade. They may want to protect young industries or to preserve access to local consumer markets for domestic firms. Cultural and social factors might also impact a government's intervention in trade. For example, some countries some countries' governments have tried to limit the influence of American culture on local markets by limiting or denying the entry of American companies operating in the media, food, and music industries. So, how do governments intervene in trade? While the past century has seen a major shift toward free trade, many governments continue to intervene in trade. Governments have several key policy areas that can be used to create rules and regulations to control and manage trade. So the first one is tariffs. Tariffs are taxes imposed on imports. There are two kinds of tariffs. The first one is specific tariffs, which are levied as a fixed charge, and ad valorem tariffs, which are calculated as a percentage of the value. Many governments still charge ad valorem tariffs as a way to regulate imports and raise revenues for their coffers. The second government intervention in trade is subsidies. A subsidy is a form of government payment to a producer. There are the types of subsidies include tax breaks or low interest loans, both of which are common. Subsidies can also be cash grants and government equity participation, which are less common because they require a direct use of government resources. The third one is import quotas and VER, or voluntary export restraints. Import quotas and voluntary export restraints are two strategies to limit amount of imports into a country. The importing government directs import quotas while VER are imposed at the discretion of the exporting nation in conjunction with the importing one. The fourth one is the currency controls. Governments may limit the convertibility of one currency, usually its own, into others, usually in an effort to limit imports. Additionally, some governments will manage the exchange rate at a high level to create an import disincentive. Now, let's proceed to the next one, which is the local content requirements. Many countries continue to require that a certain percentage of a product or an item be manufactured or assembled locally. Some countries specify that a local firm must be used as a domestic partner to conduct business. So the next one is anti-dumping rules. Dumping occurs when a country or a company sells product below market price, often in order to win a market and a market share and weaken a competitor. Next is export financing. So it is where the government provide financing to domestic companies to promote exports. Next is free trade zone. So many countries designate certain geographic areas as free trade zones. These areas enjoy reduced tariffs, taxes, customs, procedures, or restrictions in an effort to promote trade with other countries. So in the Philippines, example of this is the and pure or in the pure gold company where you can buy goods which are tax free. Next is administrative policies. These are the bureaucratic policies and procedures governments may use to deter imports by making entry or operations more difficult and time consuming. So that's the end of this chapter or this lesson. To summarize, there are more than 30 major types of government, and each type consists of multiple variations. At one end of the political ideology extremes is anarchism, which contends that individuals should control political activities and public government is both unnecessary and unwanted. The other extreme is totalitarianism, which contends that every aspect of an individual's life should be controlled and dictated by a strong central government. Neither extreme exists in its purest form in the real world. Instead, most countries have a combination of both. This combination is called pluralism, which asserts that both public and private groups are important in a well functioning political system. Democracy is the most common form of government today. Democratic governments derive their power from the people of the country either by direct referendum, called a direct democracy, or by means of elected representatives of the people, known as representative democracy. Capitalism is an economic system in which the means of production are owned and controlled privately. In contrast, a planned economy is one in which the government or state directs and controls the economy. Now, there are three main legal types of legal systems. The first one is civil law, second is common law, and religious law. In practice, countries use a combination of one or more of these systems and often adopt them to suit their local values and culture. So, government business trade relations are the relationships between national government and global businesses. Governments intervene in trade to protect their nation's economy and industry, as well as promote and preserve their social, cultural, political, and economic structures and philosophies. Governments have several key policies or key policy area in which they can control or create rules and regulations in order to control and manage trade, including tariffs, subsidies, import quotas and VER, currency controls, local content requirements, anti-dumping rules, export financing, free trade zone, and administrative policies. So this is the end of our lesson. So I hope you learned something from this discussion. Have a good day, everyone.